value that are therefore able to boost systems and mechanisms. So there is a lot that COVID has opened up, particularly for us as is our relationship with India and what's happening in India. And I am very confident that despite the challenges that both countries are facing, we are learning very critical lessons that I believe if we can be able to break them down and ask ourselves, what can we do about them? There is no reason whatsoever why we should therefore be able to have a very strong measure and framework that can be able to help us respond to any other pandemic that come our way as a country. Just
Okay, importance of frameworks in order to respond to such situations. Martin Zuwino, even as you add your voice on that, I'd like to shift focus to yet another story that is making headlines. Kenya pushing closure for the refugee camps to 2022. The date is June 30th. And this is all despite of a court order in place that was suspending this particular plan between the Kenyan government and UNHCR. What's your take on this? Because Kenya does apply to international laws, especially those that concern handling of refugees and the repatriation and all that.
Thank you, Rogers. You have just said it well. We are living in a global village, and we are a party to the UNHCR. You cannot just wake up and say we are closing. Remember, we are dealing with human beings. However insecurity they bring in that region, we have to play with the global standards and commitments. So what the Kenyans should do is to work through that lineup. Just the same way we accepted them to come, the same way we should work out how they should go out. These are not goods that you can just say, pack and go. They go where? They have children, they are going to school there. Some have just known that place as their country. And also, we cannot work in haste, not knowing what will become of us next. That's why those global bodies are very important. Having said that, I think Kevin Osinde was very right. On vaccine, what we have learned from this COVID, we have to be self-reliant. And in this country, we are very, very lucky because we have a very renowned institution in scientific research, that is KEMRI. What they need is so that we can manufacture our own vaccines here, our own medicine here. Relying on other countries when they are hit, they have to take care of their own people first before you can get anything. We have seen this from US. Most of our donors come from US. They cut almost 70% of what they do here. And also now India, where they do all the manufacturing of those vaccines. They cannot just release them because they are in agreement with other countries.
Okay.
Take care of their own first. But if you allow me, Rogers, just to comment on what we refuse as Parliament, the appointment, I think, talk from my heart, there is the position office, the appointee to those offices. Remember, from independent, we only had one minister, J.D. Otiende, if I can, before Olo Aringo came. Ministries are run by departments, but not PSS. Right now we have so many PSS in one ministry, and it's not justifiable. Now, on the appointment again on judiciary, ASC, we have to have some moral, especially when we are considering people. Now, it's not a good picture. The president from the same region, Attorney General from the same region, and we are going to have Chief Justice from the same region, one Kenya. This is why the law and the implementation of itself becomes convoluted because of that kind of arrangement. And you can see it also in the Minister of Health. President from the same region, Minister from the same region, the chair of the KEMSA from the same region, the CEO, which is suspended from the same region. What picture is that? So this is where the corruption gets its way and engulf the whole nation. Just my thought.
Oh, interesting observations right there. Definitely an issue to do with inclusivity. And I'm sure Tandaza will have an issue to pick with that. Okay.
1 minute. I've said this before, and it's unfortunate. I've even had to cram the specific article in the Constitution, and I hope I'll get right, Article 250, especially sub-Article 4, when it comes to issues of inclusivity and regional balance. And it's very unfortunate. And I think it starts from the recruitment panels. We saw in the GSC, as it was composed, the majority were from one region. And what did you expect? It has come to pass. Now, we are looking at the recruitment of the IBC commissioners. If you look at those appointed, of course, you can already see there is a bias in terms of the vetting panel, the panel that is appointed. That means it's like they have a script that we've put you purposely so that you make sure whoever comes out of this comes from this region. Okay. Surely, can we actually, at least for now, going forward towards 2022, I know all these appointments have bearing towards the 22 elections. But since we want one Kenya, since we want to be peaceful this time, and I hope it's going to be, can it also start from the appointments of the interviewing panels so that there is inclusivity, their judgment is really based on merit, not because outside the interviewing panel, people, 3 or 4 will go and canvass in their mother tongue and say, since we are the majority, this is the person you are going to push.
Well, questions around the face of Kenya and these appointments and all that. But, gentlemen, let's shift focus to what was transpiring in Parliament. It has been a busy 2 days, Wednesday, Thursday, where they had the special sittings. But the latest being the speakers of both houses actually extending the debate on the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020 to next week, suspending that particular vote where members were expected to take at the end of this 2-day special sitting that was to end on Thursday evening. Let's take a look at a story that was prepared even before we canvass into some of the issues, the contention issues that seem to stand out around the BBI debate. Take a look.
It was the second and last day of the special sitting of the bicameral parliament as members debated the now controversial Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020, which proposes various and crucial amendments to the 2010 Constitution. The co-chairs of the Joint Legal Affairs Committee that conducted public participation could not agree on whether the bill should be amended or not, despite the glaring typographical errors.
We cannot amend the bill in its present form or the substance thereof.
I want to appeal to the House, Mr. Speaker, to correct the errors that are appearing on this bill before it is released to the people of Kenya for voting. It will be very undesirable, Mr. Speaker, for the National Assembly to pass a bill that has got clauses that are different from what is being passed by this House before we do the corrections.
And people should not fear to refuse to collapse this bill, because we have already debated here, the chair of the committee, minority leader, all the people who have made contributions, Senator Petrolina here, have referred to very glaring, Mr. Speaker, mistakes in this bill.
And I think even those people who are opposing this thing should think twice, because they might be getting an opportunity to survive. Because when you look at the leader of opposition, that person is going to be number 3 in Parliament.
The delimitation of the 70 new constituencies and distributed to the 28 counties out of the 47 counties still remains one of the contentious issues.
If the BBI proponents did not hijack this responsibility and left it to IBC, the people of Nyeri, the people of Kieni, the people of Madeira would have had a great opportunity to appear before the IBC and put up their case using figures and statistics and get constituencies. As it is, if these amendments go through, the people of Nyeri are cooked.
It never anywhere in this constitution says that IBC can add or alter the number. And that is why it is clear, 89.6.
Function of delimitation under this constitution, Senator Wamatangi is with a constitutional body called Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission.
Wamatangi, you don't get yourself into a legal quagmire. Ignorance is no longer bliss when it comes to the law. Thank you.
Due to the interest that the bill has attracted from members of parliament, both speakers agreed to extend the debate to next week before members can take a vote on the bill.
Mr. Speaker, as a House, this bill, when you look at it, Mr. Speaker, the great proposals that are here is that cabinet secretaries will come from the floor of this House. At the moment, Mr. Speaker, we are experiencing the presidential system.
The Kenyans can exercise the power they have donated to us directly, and that is what they have done today. And I think it is important for us to seize the opportunity when it comes our way next time, so that we are able to propose some of these changes ahead of time.
Leo sisi tunakuja hapa kuzungumzia bill, Mheshimiwa Spika, ambayo kwanza inaongezea mzigo wa Njiku ambaye tayari sahihi ana mzigo wa kutulipa mishahara sisi wabunge 416.
The Speaker of the Senate will have to gazette another special sitting for next week for senators to conclude their debate, while their colleagues in the National Assembly resume from their one-month recess Tuesday next week. Chris Dairo, KTN News.
Well, that report by Chris Thairo painting a picture of the sort of debate that was on the floor of the House in regard to the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020. Let's take a look at some of the contentious issues. Constituency delimitation, the criteria and formula that was used in placing the 70 new constituencies, implications of a bloated parliament also played out, the principles of separation of power, and whether parliament can actually make changes to the bill or it's a conveyor belt in this particular constitutional process. Dr. Luchetu, let me start with you before we get the intrigues of the parliamentarians in the panel. Looking at the debate as it played out yesterday and the day before, what say you about the contentious issues that we've just highlighted?
Thank you. I'm actually not surprised that we have actually arrived at the point where we are in at the moment, because the question that comes at now is that what is a popular initiative? How did we start? And the point of how we started from the handshake to where it has reached, actually, I will not term that as a popular initiative. A popular initiative is never pushed by a government. That's why it has now led us to the kind of problems we are actually experiencing. Because, as I have shared before, is that the issue of boundaries and constituencies is actually the mandate of IEBC. So who gave actually the BBI task force that authority to actually divide or decide in terms of the extra constituencies? Again, I've mentioned before that these constituencies going around 2022 is likely to be a bone of contention and a source of conflict. And already we have seen that starting from the House. Number two, when you talk about separation of powers, it's about every arm of government checking, like the parliament is actually supposed to be checking the roles and responsibilities as executed by the executive. If we go by some of the proposals, these are actually going to be removed. We are going to go back to the imperial presidency. And this is something that actually the country has fought about before, up to the point where we came to the second liberation. But we are now going back to that problem. Number three, we have a challenge when it comes to how we want to administer and run some institutions. For example, the role of the National Police Service Commission being now taken to the Inspector General. And the Inspector General is going to be appointed by the executive. So these are problems that you see. And the bigger one now, currently, we have the challenge with COVID. We have the challenge with our economy being in high dependence unit. So the question is, can Kenyans actually sustain a bloated parliament? Why are Kenyans actually overrepresented? Why are Kenyans actually overtaxed to run a government? Because these are problems that if you look at it deeper, and I'm sure that's where the members of parliament are coming from, is actually we cannot help this country to move forward if we don't really become lean in terms of managing our resources and in terms of actually how we want to run this government. And my last point is the issue around elections are always a motive. Curricular report, he gave us a warning that we need to prepare 2 years before election. And you can see now the BBI is coming at a point where, again, the president has now declared positions vacant at IBC. And now setting the whole ball rolling, you can see all these things are kind of being hurried again, that the parliamentarians were actually expected to vote. Thank God they actually did not take the vote, because if they went in for that vote yesterday, I'm sure it will have been negative. And these are issues that we really need to debate and agree going forward as a country, whether this is the right direction for a low economy country and the challenge we are facing today.
Okay, I don't know if they went to a vote, it would be negative, because I'm sure the parties have streamlined their members to vote in one way or the other. Kevin Osido, even as you add your point, talk to us about this proposal to create 70 new constituencies. The promoters of the bill have shared new constituencies among 28 counties, and this move some members of parliament term illegal, usurping the mandate from the electoral body.
Jesse, the BBI process is going to pass. It is going to pass because that of the amendment bill. It's going to happen that way because if you look at the process in the manner in which this particular journey has been walked, the people of Kenya have been effectively involved. In fact, even members of parliament themselves, at the level of the task force and the steering committee, the public participation process, they had an opportunity. The only thing which I think is happening is spending too much politics. Let me call it the politicization of the amendment bill, which is our first amendment as a country in the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Whether or not we look at the 70 constituencies, what we are not spending time to focus on, Jesse, is the process, because there was a formula that relied on statistics and also relied on facts to be able to arrive at the proposal to have 70 new constituencies. This was the formula. The crafters of the BBI, after having listened to Kenyans, especially when it came to the issues around fair distribution of resources and representation, went back to our foundational mechanism. So they looked at the population quota. And if you look at the population of our country, and that is why we did our census, population census, before this particular recommendation. And so if you look at the history in terms of our population quota, the constituencies that we have constituencies in this country that are being led by, that have a quota of, say, 100,000 people, and they are being represented by one member. Others, for example, in areas like Kisumu, in northeastern, you have a population of more than, say, 400,000 people still being represented by one person. But if you look at the way these resources are being distributed, we are using the same formula. Now, the crafters of the 70 recommendation, those who recommended the 70 constituencies relied on a formula which focused on the number 132,000. So that if you look at the constituencies that have been recommended for delimitation or addition, there are constituencies that have a higher population quota as opposed to the others. The second issue was the protected districts, particularly in the areas of northeastern Kenya, that you do not touch them. And that was purely because if you look at the investment in terms of infrastructure, the way the amount of resources or investment it will take to construct a road from, say, Nairobi to Wajir is not the same as what it will cost to construct a road from Nairobi to Kiambu. And so if we delinked politics from this whole process and focused on what I think one of the members of parliament called facts and figures, there should be no reason why we should spend too much time and antagonize this particular process. Members of parliament have canvassed effectively on this particular process, and what the public is being showed is purely politics in my view. Number two, and the final on this issue, I don't think that there were different bills that were submitted by IEBC. The Constitution has mandated the IEBC to focus purely on issues to do with the referendum because it is the institution whose responsibility it is to undertake that process. IEBC has pronounced itself in terms of how they received the amendment bills from the promoters, the number of copies they received, and I don't think that IEBC submitted different copies to the county assemblies. We have had people saying that only 11 county assemblies voted on the right bill. It is not possible, Jesse.
Okay.
And I think we should be very careful around confusing the public, because ultimately it is the citizens of Kenya who are going to vote on this particular referendum. Why? Because it is a popular initiative. The powers of parliament at this particular level are limited because it is not a parliamentary initiative. What parliament can do is very slim. And ultimately, I pray and request them to fast track this process so that we take this particular referendum to the people of Kenya to vote for it. Then we focus on the benefits that will accrue once we have these changes put in effect. Young people are looking for employment. We have county governments waiting for, effective measures to have resources so that they can be able to boost on-source revenue, flip back into the economy, and grow our economies of scale. That is not the kind of discussion that we are focusing on.
Okay, well, unfortunately, politics is definitely playing a part. Let me bring in the politicians. Owino, I'll start with you. What say you about to open the bill or not? Bearing in mind the errors, and we've had members of parliament actually point them out, using this as a reason to perhaps make amendments to this popular initiative bill. What side are you on?
Thank you, Rogers. We have to play by the rule. The Act 255, it does not allow the parliament to open it up. And those which are being referred as errors, just typos, some small errors here and there, those can be dealt with administratively. You cannot violate Constitution by trying to correct it. It doesn't work that way. And I said earlier that Parliament does not really play a ceremonial. What we are doing now are captured. All those views you hear. All the views of the JLAC are also captured. All the views of the people who participated are also captured. There is no lawmaking that is 100%. So all these views, if we choose to do another amendment, will be considered. So there's no wastage here. The other point I want to make that if the vote taken yesterday would have been a landslide, and this thing is going to pass. And remember, even if it does not really pass, in quotes, it still goes to the people. Because it is a popular initiative. There's nothing you can do about that.
Okay.
As the 70 constituency, in my constituency, they will have almost 300,000 people, but they are not, Dewa is not one of them. Homa Bay and Migori does not even have one single. But what we agreed is that there are so many things that is good in this bill that is going to help us, like accountability we have talked about, mixing the presidential and parliamentary. In fact, Rogers, if the ministers were in the House and the Prime Minister in the House, would have abated this corruption which is running away from us. Lastly, which I think is very important in this bill, is economy and shared prosperity. This country is being developed lopsided. If you go to my constituency, not even a road is there for farmers to take their canes to the factory. And we are spending billions of money constructing highways, mostly in one local area. It does not work that way, but the BBI bill is going to make sure that the funds and resources are spent equitably. So there are a lot of things put in here. We will vote it in next week.
Well, we'll definitely wait and see how that plays out. Kasim Tandaza, I know your thought is right next to your tongue, but just hold on to it. Let's take a short break. When we come back, I'll interrogate your views on the 70 new constituencies and perhaps the role of the ombudsman, because it played out on the floor of the House that this might be contravening the role of the JSC in one way or the other. Stay with us. We'll be back after this.
This is KTN News.